Before I was given this role, they were telling me that this is one of the most high-profile panels that I will be moderating. And I showed up this morning. The first thing Jatin comes up and tells me is, Akul, are you sure you're ready for this? I said, I think I'm as ready as I can be. Because just for the audience, when I was growing up, my dad would constantly tell me, he's like, there is one person in Indian business that I wish you could become like, and that's Mr. Mohandas Pai. I also used to work at a team which is now called General Catalyst in India, and we have Mr. Anand Chandrasekharan here. In the audience are two people whose podcasts I've been listening to at least for the last 5 years, Mr. J. Sai Deepak and Mr. Annamalai. So when they were telling me, do your best, I'm like, I'm as nervous as I could be. I'm going to try. And so the only thing I could change at that moment was I put in a pocket square. Because that's the only thing I could do differently. So with that, I think the idea of this panel is to talk about scaling Indian enterprises, the road to global leadership. And the way I would like to start is to talk about the evolutionary journey of Indian enterprises on the global stage. And Mr. Pai, I would like to open with you, which is having witnessed the transformation of Indian tech landscape from Infosys early days to today's startup ecosystem. What do you consider the most significant shift in how Indian enterprises have approached global markets or how they approach global markets today compared to 20 years ago?
The Indian IT service industry is a role model for India because right on from 1990, they realized India was too small a market for them. They said, we'll have a global product, we'll have global quality, we will provide services around the world. And they brought in quality, they trained their people, they brought in project management skills, marketing, etc. They've grown to $235 billion with a market value of $500 billion. That's a role model for India. And much of Indian industry has sought protection from the outside world, put up tariff barriers, and made money. Today, corporate pre-tax profits are 15% of our GDP. That's very high. 15% of GDP. We got tariff barriers protecting them from everything. India was a very large exporter of textiles throughout our history. But we have not been successful in the last 30 years because we put tariffs against import of polyester fiber and polyester fabric. Because today, 60-70% of garment export is synthetic, and we protect our industry. And we hurt the garment industry, which is labor-intensive, which can provide a lot of jobs. And they've gone to Bangladesh, a neighboring area. We give them all the raw material. They do the stitching. So I think the biggest thing that should happen to India is to treat the world as a market and make sure that you can create enterprises outside India, in India, and export and grow. Look at S&P in the United States. I think 50% of the revenues and profits come from outside the United States. So market value that you see in the stock market is not from the income you earn from America alone, but what you earn globally. So we got to tackle the global markets, and we have an Anglo-Saxon work culture. Of the top 50 digital companies in America, 50 are Indian Indian CEOs. There's nothing wrong with Indians. It's just that the mentality has to change to say, I'm going to compete, I'm going to build for the world, I'm going to do well, and I'm going to do it, and they can succeed. That is now coming in. That's the biggest shift we had. Because, we were caged, we were suppressed, we were oppressed, we were depressed by bad policies, by over-regulations, which still kill us today. And a lot of bad policy is spoken about it, but now they're being released and people are understanding debt has come down for the corporate world. And I think we're going to see, we invest $1 trillion a year. $1 trillion a year. Third largest investment in the world after United States, China, and then India.
Thank you. And on that subject now, I would like to bring in Mr. Jeetu Patel. So as we talk about India making it for the global markets, what is it that you've seen from your perspective at Cisco? What are the unique strengths that you see Indian enterprises bringing to global competition that weren't as apparent a decade ago?
It's actually a very interesting time in India because the swagger of the younger generation is back in a way that I haven't actually ever seen. I grew up in India. I came to America in '91, and for a long period of time, I actually wasn't that engaged with the activity of what was going on in India. And now that I go back, at the time when I moved here, there was a fascination about America. Where I need to make sure that whatever I do, I need to make it to America. Now, when I talk to the younger generation over there, one, there's a spring in the step, there's a swagger in the country, and they can take it or leave it, but they're actually pretty good with staying in India. They're pretty good with coming here. And so that level of confidence, I think, is probably one of the biggest shifts that's occurred. The second thing is, if you think about what the big major mental model shifts that have occurred in India, it used to be a place where people would go for cost, cost efficiencies. You're now seeing it be a place where people are going for talent. We have about 35,000 people in India, and the largest reason we go there is no longer cost. It's because of the access to talent. It used to be a very services-oriented mindset. Now there's actually a shift that's occurring for a product-oriented mindset as well. It used to be that they used to actually, scale was a liability for the longest time. Now scale is actually becoming an asset. You, of course, have a demographic advantage. But the most interesting part that I would end with is, if you look at the government, I happen to be the country sponsor of India for Cisco. And so we go there a couple of times a year. You get to meet government officials and government leaders. And I actually have never seen any other government in the world that operates more like a startup than India does. And you sit down and you talk to the people in the government, and they are so keen to make sure that they understand what's broken and how quickly can they actually go out and fix it. Now, by the way, are there things that are completely still very, very broken in India? Absolutely. And there's still a lot that needs to be fixed. But I'd say the rate of progress, if you measure a country's future based on the rate of growth and rate of progress, it's really hard to not be impressed with the progress that they've made over the course of the past 5-7 years, specifically. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing. I think 2 points there. One is I would like to bring in Saket to talk about how the Indian entrepreneur's mindset has changed in terms of someone who actually started building in India in the cybersecurity space and then relocated to the US. And then, Anand, I would like to bring you in to talk about what is it that you're seeing with the talent, given that you work across both the US and India, and what are the challenges / gaps that you see, and what are the opportunities that you see with Indian talent? So, Saket.
Thank you. So, if I break your question down into a few steps here, just for context, I run a cybersecurity startup. We have around 100 people in India and 100 people in the US. And we started, like a lot of good companies in India, as a services company. My first angel investor is sitting next to me, Anand. So he was crazy enough to bet very early on us. And we did quite well as a services company. And that was one of the biggest curses, I can say. So we started in 2012, 2013. I'm giving you the context because it'll just give you a perspective about doing well in India sometimes is also a very bad thing because you keep doing the right thing for too long and that becomes a problem. So in like 4 or 5 years, I was still in college when we started, and we were like at $5-6 million in revenue in 2018. I think that's when you came in, Anand, because we saw that in order to scale 5 to 50 to 500 million in revenue, we would need to hire like 25,000 people. Nothing wrong there. Sir has done that too many times, but it's only taken one lifetime. So today, with the opportunity which is out there, what could we do on the product side and scale that up? So we actually decided to let go of a thriving services business, 30 people team, 5 million revenue, profitable, growing at 70% year over year. And we decided we'll pivot, and we pivoted to a product company. The problem with being a product company out there is the expectations from customers, unfortunately, was very, very wrong. So we actually had to move our headquarters we were incubated from IIT Bombay, so we started from India and Bombay all the way to Silicon Valley. And I know that there's a lot of incredible things being talked about from an India perspective. I just want to get it to some ground reality of the challenges. At the same time, I still hold my Indian passport. I'm on an O1 visa, so I continue to be there. I know I'll settle back in India. So, fir bhi dil hai Hindustani. But I'm just trying to give you the perspective. It's just the reality. So if we treat reality with what the good and the bad is. So one of the worst things there was, while building a services company, we did the end-to-end of UPI, Bheem, before it was launched, the end-to-end cybersecurity of that. I knew every CISO out there And I got the first $3 million in revenue from our India customers, HDFC Bank, ICICI Bank, Delhi Airport, Bombay Airport. It was one of the worst decisions of my life to start with Indian customers, because not only did they go ahead and expect a very different degree of support, but the direction in which they took us, because the maturity of those customers was so bad. Today, I have 0 people in sales in India. I do around $30 million in revenue, ARR, growing at over 100% year over year. And I have 0 sales in India. Out of $30 million, I probably have less than $1 million of revenue in India, with over 80% in the US. And the largest companies you can think of in the world, Google, Facebook, Netflix, Caterpillar, Chevron, blah, 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 they're all my customers. So I'm trying to give you the perspective that was a problem. On the positive, I have 0 engineers in the US today. And I have my entire engineering team, 100 people in India. 80% of them are ex-Uber, AWS, Spotify, Netflix, Cred, Flipkart. And these are arguably the smartest engineers on the planet, probably at a similar cost base. It's not cheaper, but I get 2 times the productivity. Like, we were doing a big launch this week. Next week is RSA conference, a pretty big conference for cybersecurity. For the last 4 months, 7 days a week, 2 times stand-up, 8 a.m., 8 p.m., the entire engineering team. That's what has been happening for the last 4 months. And we just released an agentic AI-driven 25 Gen AI agents talking to each other, and we released something pretty cool, 100% autonomous third-party risk management. That degree of intensity is almost unheard of. I think it was there in the early days of a Facebook or a Google, but you can't take a Google engineer and expect that. And that's the advantage and the power of India. So now the product that we've built, today I serve some of the largest companies on the planet, and I'm very, very proud of what we built there. We moved our sales team here. I have a 100-member sales team here, so that is there. But that is because now we have the best of both the worlds, and because we've done reasonably well on both sides, I think we've cracked the problem, and that's why we're growing at 100%. So again, I wanted to ground it to what, at least from my vantage point, I see as opportunities, at the same time challenges. I still don't want to go back to India and sell, because it's just a shit market. It's just not there when it comes to understanding of cybersecurity from a maturity perspective. Anand?
I loved what you were saying. I totally forgot the question. Well, maybe what I'll do is just, I've had the good fortune of investing in companies in the India-US corridor for 10 plus years now. And the Saket is here. There's about 20 of my companies that are, probably on their way to becoming 100 million plus in revenue companies. And so I think we are sort of in the 4th iteration, 4th chapter. I think the first chapter, founders like Binny and Sachin, so Binny I've gotten to know really well over the last, 15 years or so. I think they were taking so much execution risk in India that they didn't want to take product risk. So they just took an idea that was globally successful. So if you looked at the first set of successful companies, you saw, the Amazon of India in India, the Uber of India, because, a lot of people say they're copycat companies, but I actually think it's smart because you didn't take product market fit risk, right? Consumers will pay for that capability. And not surprisingly, many of them were successful. That's where I also had some operating experience in India. I think the second generation was exactly what Mr. Pai was saying, which is folks realized that there is global software being developed where India can have a cost advantage, which was sort of the big advantage at that time. And so you saw the emergence of Freshworks and Zoho and a bunch of companies where they did not innovate on the product side, again, for product market fit, low risk, but they innovated on price and business model and how they sold and selling to the low end of those markets. So they didn't sell to the Salesforce customer base, but they sold to the low end of that base if you were Freshworks and so on. And then the third set of folks realized that there's a lot of technology components that have been developed because Flipkart and other companies built those stacks, and they're applying that to digitize industries and GDP. So you're now seeing like the steel industry being digitized, the chemical industry being digitized, the solar panel manufacturing industry being digitized. And so people are using the same technology components that build B2C marketplaces to build B2B marketplaces, right, and digitizing the industries. And if you look at Off Business or Zetwork, they've done pretty well in sort of bringing together fragmented markets. I think we're now at a point in the market that I'm really excited about, which is deep tech, which is founders basically saying, whether it's agri-tech, whether it is defense, whether it's manufacturing, health, and these are, by the way, the biggest pieces of GDP in any country. And so founders are now saying, I don't want to join a startup necessarily, even coming out of an IIT and coming out of a technical school. They're basically saying, I want to solve a problem, and I want to dedicate myself to this problem for the next 20 years. So again, I echo Jeetu's point from a very different starting point, which is if you look at the bullish, bearish indicators, the biggest leading indicator is the swagger and the ambition that founders have. And I feel like I would call myself a person of like reasonable ambition. I've almost like reevaluated my own ambition looking at some of the 20-something founders. And I'm like, if you are having these big dreams, how should I dream and what kind of dream should I have? Because I think the founders are actually now solving problems at India scale. And I think it's taken 10 to 15 years to get to this place where we have to develop these muscles. 10 years ago, if we had this ambition, we might have fallen short of achieving some of the ambitions that we have now. So I think people betting on India also have to bet long, because some of these ambitions do take time to achieve. And so, sometimes I find myself on group chats or group threads where people are talking about an exit, people are talking about, what is the time to an exit, and the company has just gotten product market fit in a complex market, right? Security, it takes a long time to get product market fit, especially building a product out of India. And so you sometimes have to let the founders cook, right? And get to a place where they can finally dream about building these large companies.
I think a couple of things that stood out for me, but one there
Can
is...
I add one thing to what was just said? I think there's not a shortage of technical talent in India anymore, right? In fact, there's an abundance of it. There's also not a shortage of ambition anymore. But I would like to see India take more creative risk. And if I think about why is it that the technical talent is not short, why is it that there's not a level of shortage of ambition, but every major shift in a wave that happens, they're not the ones leading that wave. And so that still remains, right? Like AI is a wave that actually India could lead in a pretty meaningful way because they've got more data, they've got more people that are actually in the right technical background to be able to participate. But India is not the one that's number one in that wave right now, And I do feel like there's a creative risk dimension that probably needs to be thought through because it's the large conglomerates are doing very well, and the ambition actually is quite crazy. Like if you go talk to the big five, big six, which we have the privilege of talking to all the major top people over there all the time, there's nothing ambition-wise as a market that they're not chasing right now. There's not a single market that they're not chasing, right? But when you get down to the investments that need to be made, we ought to make sure that the capital structure and how investments get made in startups have a level of boldness that I feel like a US has benefited from. Like you can go raise a couple $2 billion over here to go do something pretty meaningful in AI. It's still hard to do that in India right now.
Yeah. I want to add, the biggest challenge, like you say, is capital. You see, China had a 10-year plan in 2015 where they said, we're going to invest $150 billion into AI. They funded it. They're a very dominant power. America has been doing it because you've got a free market economy, abundant capital here, risk capital here. China said, we're going to invest in EV. And they invested $100 billion. They gave subsidies. They dominate the EV field. Solar. Even in solar panels, they dominated by giving manufacturing. China did it with capital. And, US has always had surplus capital, is the country where risk is accepted, not risk, creativity is accepted because creativity is the means of making money. Fangman has 30-40% of market capitalization, very absurd valuation, but that's the way nature of the beast is. India doesn't have. Like I said, India only invested $160 billion from 2014 to 24, China $845, America $2.3 trillion. So it is capital. How are we going to get capital? Capital has to come from institutions. Our insurance companies don't invest in any funds. We got about $1.2 trillion of insurance assets. They don't invest because of stupid regulations. All right? And then now university endowments cannot invest at all. They're small, but they can invest. Okay? And the third thing is, if you have many other private endowments, family offices, they're coming in, but they're just growing. So the investable capital is the challenge. Government of India and state governments spend $110 billion a year in subsidies. $110 billion, 9 lakh crores. To those of you who know crores, it's an enormous amount of money, which is right. We cannot crib that because we want people to come up and all that. But they must spend at least $5-10 billion in innovation and R&D, which they have to do. And I think that's what I want my friend to carry forward, to tell people, invest in them, because that is what is going to pull up the whole country. Because value is created disproportionately at the top. We're not at the bottom and the middle. At the top, we have to do. And we can't be overtaken by China. We can't be a colony of America. We can't be a colony of China. And we have the capacity, like you said. It's not that you lack anything. Or most countries lack the human capital. We have enormous human capital. Brilliant people, great techies. Like he says, a fantastic work culture. They will not go home for 6 months, eat thai sadam and one pickle once a week and do very well. And I think, this is the important thing that we must understand about India. And I think that's where we have to have a partnership with people from the US and India and create that corridor where money can come. Yes, they will make money in the US by selling in America. I totally agree with you, because Indians don't pay very well. We got a company called Darwinbox, SaaS, HR and all that, 1,200 companies, they got clients, 300 they replaced SAP and Oracle, and the Indians will pay them peanuts. And they got to drop their pants to get the business there in India, which is very sad, because they think that they're born to value. They beat you up. In America, they treat you with respect, they pay you reasonably well, right?
I think, like, if you think of R&D, I think India is good on the D dimension, but not the R dimension.
Yeah, not the R dimension.
And the R dimension is actually pretty important for AI.
500 computer science PhDs in the country, peanuts. More Indians go to America and do PhDs than 500 there. Okay? Our universities are not funding. And the IITs are very good, but they're mostly teaching institutions, because they focus on teaching, which is nothing wrong, but we need more money for R&D. Money is the problem. Capital is the problem. And that is the thing that we have to solve together as a people in the next few years.
Well, good news, Cisco is doing its part.
Yeah.
We're investing very heavily in India.
Give us $20 billion for 5 years, man. Don't give us peanuts. 20 billion, a small change for you. You got how much? 300 billion cash in the balance sheet?
So it's going to be 20 from Cisco, 20 from Infosys, so that makes 40. And we have a good deal here.
Awesome. Switching gears a bit. I think we've spoken a bit about the talent. We've spoken a bit about the challenges with the capital that we are facing. I want to talk about your experience in execution specifically now, which is, what are the challenges that you're seeing Indian entrepreneurs face when they scale globally, and some of them that they don't really know that they will face? What are some of those underestimated challenges that you're seeing? And I'd love to get a comment from all of you on that.
Yeah, I can start with that one. I have been an investor, but I've also built products in India. And the biggest one, I would say, fully agreeing with what Jeetu was saying earlier about creativity, is when I would chat with founders, I would hear the word jugaad a lot when I moved to India. And it's kind of a double-edged sword, right? On one side, it's meant to convey hustle, and it's meant to convey doing a lot with a little. And I think India does get a lot of credit for stretching the dollar and doing a lot with a little, and kind of hustle in that sense. But in working in India, working with teams in Indian companies, one thing I've found is that it's also come to convey a sense of compromise and a sense of not striving for excellence. And what I mean by that is there's creativity in terms of large ambition and the kind of ambition that requires capital. But there's also creativity in the last 1% of finishing products. There's creativity in the last 5% of finishing products to convey a sense of excellence that your ambition, you then put in your products. And I feel like that just being in the trenches has been also a gap, where ultimately what that results in is that you give up a little bit of your control to some overlord somewhere else, who then controls the quality and the excellence in the product. And I think that it's not like the the innate ambition isn't there. But I think that somewhere in the execution, the sense of 80-20, the sense of kind of being frugal with the dollar, gets in the way of that uncompromising excellence, which also falls under the jugaad attitude, where it kind of gets in the way when it comes on the last 1%. So that's probably the one thing I would say in addition to everything else that's been said.
Yeah, I think, so my team generally accuses me of being just too direct. So I'm going to take what all of you have said and slightly make that more bolder, my limited understanding. Instead of using the word creativity, I would actually call it courage. And let me double click what I mean by that, right? Because creativity generally is on the softer side. I'll give an example, right? Forget about how many startups fail. And very unfortunately, when startups fail, they of course get the wrong headlines and enough people out there to say, oh, we knew it, startups are a fad, blah, blah. And we all know, at least at Stanford, and that the value creation in the last 25, 30 years globally has really been because of startups, right? Now, the courage, I personally feel, the delta of that courage is the fundamental missing area. Like, if you just take random sample, throw it and look at it, 100 startups. And I think this is what Mr. Piyush Goyal was also mentioning in one of his recent talk. Forget about how many are successful or not. That is actually the byproduct. But if you take 100 sample startups in India today, how many are actually working on something which can scale to $1 trillion? Forget about tech. Tech is an enabler for an outcome, right? How many are actually, today if you're working on an e-commerce company, it cannot be $1 trillion company. Amazon is not $1 trillion company because of Amazon, it's because of AWS. So if you really think about it, that if everything goes right, is your startup worthwhile to become $1 trillion company? And the problem is the answer to probably, my guess, and Mohan sir, you will have the answer better than I will. Would love to get your thoughts. Probably majority of the startups, 60, 70 of them in India, if you take 100 random step, if everything went well, you still cannot be $1 trillion company. Why? Because in India, the biggest company is still Reliance, which is $250 billion. So what I'm trying to get towards is, if you're in India and the borders have vanished when it comes to technology, why are we not at least dreaming to say, I'll do this, and if everything goes well, this has the legs to become $1 trillion company. And the last piece, which I'll close with, is I thought that I'm coming here, I'm chatting with you, you guys will agree, disagree, go back, and we'll go back to our normal selves, right? What can help? Because I was born and raised in India. I was very fortunate, I got some incredible investors, so I moved to the Silicon Valley 6 years back. And I'm doing this in my own little way. But if everybody's sitting here, we can almost, like, if you guys can take this initiative, almost create like a Stanford India bridge where coach or teleport an entrepreneur from India. And when I say teleport, it doesn't have to be cost-wise, but just what you see out here and the vantage point and the horizon, and make a standard model like a Y Combinator where you don't have to do anything. Say, give me 0.2% of your company. I'm a student at Stanford, no money required. I will spend 4 hours a week with you. I can tell you there'll be dozens of startups in India who would love to get your guidance just to do that. And it's a win-win for everybody because you're getting some equity. At the same time, it's not like it's a full-time job. And that allows those people back in India who still cannot dream of $1 trillion company to start dreaming. Because here, if you throw a stone, it probably falls on anybody and everybody who thinks that their company will be $1 trillion, at least on Excel sheets. So I think that's like the big delta of taking the courage to really go and say, is the problem big enough that I'm solving, which can tomorrow become $1 trillion company?
Look, I like his chuspa, and it happened because he came from Mumbai, in Porel, or wherever place he stays, to here. And here you can dream of $1 trillion because all the $1 trillion companies are in the US. They're not in the UK, they're not in Japan, they're not in Germany, they're not anywhere else. China too, I don't think it's got $1 trillion company yet. I think it was, but they're only in the US. Why the US? $32 billion, $1 trillion of GDP, $2.5–3 trillion of tech purchases, a huge market. And the market gives you disproportionate value to innovation. And you can dream and you can grow. India, there's no market. There's no market. China too, the market is there, but no. What about UK? Germany? No. What about Japan? No. So let us not take the US example, say India might have, because it's not going to happen. Let's be real. What we need is, taking a cue from him, young people say, I'm going to create a $100 billion value company. That they can do it. I think that can be done in 3-4 years. And then
What is important for India is, what we lack is marketing and sales. Look, he will come and talk about $1 trillion in America because he stayed here, he knows how to market. Indian companies go sell their stuff for peanuts. Look at Sridhar Vembu, a great guy. He's selling his stuff Zoho for so cheap. He wants to give it to all the rural people, get people here and all. That's not ambition, man. You got to say, I'm going to have $10 billion of revenue. He's got $1 billion, something like that. He's a great guy. 30 years, but he must price it well. We don't know how to price. We don't know how to sell. Will an Indian go to a CEO and say, my stuff is worth $1 million, you pay me, otherwise forget it, I'm not going to do it. They will not. They say they will say $500,000, no, 400,000, oh, no, 300,000. Okay, give me for $50,000, sign it, I'll sign, sir. Where to sign, sir? That mentality should go. And that is a reflection of a culture where you're not seeing great successes, you're not seeing great growth. Here you come, every place you stand in New York in that, Fifth Avenue, that's $1 trillion, man. In Bombay is 1 crore if you stand there. But, but still. So I think, look, the mentality has come, like he said, the swagger, the confidence, and the enthusiasm, the self-belief, that has to come. And that will come when you come to a stage when you see success, you see role models. You see all that. All the Satya Nadella's coming has given great stuff. And this guy being a big guy in Sony, in Cisco, and all of them, this is happening. So it's happening. You have to have a little bit patience and give them a few dollars for a few dollars more.
You know what? One thing that India has that is it's impossible to teach, but you cannot teach hunger. And I always have felt like one of the biggest reasons for my success was not intellect. It was hunger. I was just hungrier than the guy next to me. And I think India has an intrinsic level of hunger and desire to win that has, in the past 5 years, permeated the entire country. And that actually is what gets me really excited. I'm really optimistic about it. I will challenge Saket that in the next decade, we will see $1 trillion company in India, hopefully.
On that note, I've been told that we only have 5 minutes left, about 3 times now. So we'll just take 2 questions here, if we could. Yeah, I think we have one over there.
Hi, thank you, Parul. Thank you for this wonderful panel. I'm a Stanford alumni and also a Cisco alumni. So Mohandas ji, when you gave your keynote before this panel started, you spoke like a true CFO. You rolled out so many great numbers. I wanted to talk about the research institutes in India, right? IITs and others. You said money is the 20 billion you talked about. But is that really the only thing? Or what are the other reasons why we talk so many years? I'm also from IIT. It's not happening. What other factors? And what about NGOs?
A culture of starvation cannot produce excellence. When you're mentally defeated and you're starved, you cannot understand what it means to get good equipment. So if you go tell him how much research if he wants 1 million, he'll say, sir, $100,000 kudanga, sir. He's very poor. You see, that mentality has to come. You must get beyond this. We must become a land of surpluses. I know, I'll not tell the story. Because when I was growing up, I used to go to a mechanic who used to do my car, Java, SD. He said, why do you have 5 children? Saab, 1 for ration, 1 for water, 1 for milk, 1 for this. Because there's shortage. My generation shortage. We should stand in the queue for milk, for water. I have stood in the queue for water. Water used to come in a tanker. I used to draw water from my house well. We've seen that. That mentality is there. So we need a generational change. We need success. We need visible signs of progress. We need great airports like the Bangalore airport. We need 2,000 planes to fly all over, which is happening. We need the beautiful roads like the expressway in Ganga Expressway in UP, right? We need that Bharat Mantapam. We need all these kind of visible signs of progress to give you this thing. In Infosys, we built a beautiful campus. And people used to tell Narayana Murthy, why are you building it? He said, we live in the third world. Everywhere we travel to a place to deliver quality to the first world. So we have to create a campus which reflects the quality stand the first world, so mentally we'll not be defeated. Yeah. Remember that. You see, please, we will spend 50 million young people to America for 4 years. You train them and send them back, and we'll have $1 trillion very soon.
Right. One more question. Right. I think, yeah, we have it here.
Sorry. It's less of a question than a comment that I would like to make, given we have been discussing research and excellence of India in research. So I'm lucky to be part of the string theory research community in India. I recently started a faculty job there. And I want to point out that that's theoretical physics is one field where, especially in string theory, where contributions of Indians working in India have been second perhaps only to the US. We have people like Professor Ashok Sen, who works out of Bangalore, and he was one of the first recipients of the Milner-Zuckerberg Fundamental Physics Prize. This guy spent all his life in Allahabad and was basically so single-handedly responsible for the so-called second superstring revolution. So we have areas of human expertise, even though mathematically very abstract things like string theory, but where we have already proven the fact that we are the best in the world. We are not the second best, we are the best.
I think this is one area that maybe we should let it sink in. There might end up being just 3 superpowers in the world, right? There's the US, there's China, and I think India has a real shot. And I mean, it's got everything, and arguably it is already. But it'll be the third largest economy by 2030. It's quite remarkable to see that. Even a decade ago, I don't think people would have believed that. So the pace of progress is actually the thing that's the most mind-blowing for me.
All right. We have 2 minutes, so 30 seconds each. Last question for all of you. We're sitting in 2025. One bold prediction for Indian enterprises in 2035. 30 seconds each. Start with Saket.
That's easy. You spoke about 3 superpowers. I would say one of the top 3 companies on the planet would be an Indian company.
Hey, I would say, probably somewhat selfishly, that India becomes more resilient with its technology capabilities and becomes more of a market for technology itself, to Mr. Pai's point. And this pain that we started off with goes away in 2035 because the value of the technology is well understood in India.
I would say that India needs one thing: to remove a lot of unnecessary regulations. We need regulations to take for a $4 trillion economy to 10 trillion, not to get stuck at a $1 trillion economy. So we need radical change in the country. And I think by 2030, India will have the largest number of $100 billion companies in the world after the United States.
I'd like to see it dominate in AI more. I feel like that's an area where there's a huge amount of intrinsic advantage, and I don't think we've fully capitalized on that yet. So that would be the area that I'd love to see India do more in.
Thank you so much. Can we have a round of applause for the panel, please?